you're going to be on the other side of that sometime. So getting the fraudsters off the network and out of our system benefits everybody.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of FI Today, the podcast where we talk about all things banks, credit unions, payments, and more. I'm your host, Kevin Miyamoto, co-founder and COO of Identify, also known as Moto.
Hello, Moto.
And we have Jordan Bennett today from NACHA talking about credit push fraud. It's going to be a fascinating podcast. Jordan, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Doing well. It's the end of the summer. Had some good vacations, ready to move into the fall. Kids' sports are coming up. It's a lot of stuff going on with NACHA. It's a good time to be alive, right?
Okay, so is this the year? I know you're a University of Georgia alum. Is this the year where they three-peat?
I hope so.
What are your thoughts?
Oh, I hope so. I enjoy watching it. I've always been a Georgia fan. My grandfather went there. Many of my aunts and uncles and my parents went there. So I met my wife there. So we are very excited to watch.
I'd say you're pretty connected then.
Yeah. We enjoy. It was fun to see them go 2 in a row. Let's see if we make it 3.
Yeah. I know I have this Ohio State mug behind me, but I moved my eldest son into Penn State earlier this week, so I might be. My wife's a Buckeye though, so I might have to do some swapping of college sports. But yeah, it'll be fun. I love college football. It should be a good year.
It's a blast, isn't it? Every Saturday, I enjoy just watching different games, seeing who's playing what, and just seeing how the conferences go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anywho, payments. Let's talk about credit push fraud. But before we jump into credit push fraud, I'd love for you just to spend a couple minutes just giving the viewers your background and some of the things that you're up to at NACHA these days.
Sure. So my name is Jordan Bennett. I went to college at UGA in the business school there, and when I got out, I started selling toilets as my first job. No relation.
Hold on, you said you're selling toilets?
Yeah, I got out of college and went immediately to selling toilets, and that didn't last very long. I got at that. Moved into banking. And yeah.
Wow, talk about a leap from toilets to banking.
Toilets to banking, yeah.
I would go on a limb and say probably smart life decision.
Yeah,
considering where you are now, yeah.
American Standard toilets to getting into mortgages and then into risk management. And it's been really fun. I've been in risk management for about 20 years now. I got into ACH fairly early. It was 2005 when I started at the Federal Reserve working in ACH operations there. And I was on a team called Special Projects. And right at that time, it was really interesting. That's when NACHA came out with their first risk management framework. And that one was focused on debit frauds. And I got to do a lot of analyzing where the return rates were, and it was all kind of by accident. I just was at the right place at the right time and really started diving in and hard on learning about third parties, learning which originators were too high, and just trying to figure out how to remove risk from the network. The network has been really good about self-policing and self-governing. We've those first risk management frameworks on debit fraud really reduced the risk in the network. There was a growing concern with debit frauds, and that's when that return rate rule came out. That's when third-party senders were formally identified in the network. That's when different rules went in to make sure that banks were managing their third-party senders and their originators appropriately. So all that happened, and the return rates there have dropped dramatically, and they've stayed there. And when we were doing our recent study on risk in the network, we heard back from the financial institutions and from the third-party senders and the originators that, debit fraud's not going away, but we have the tools in place to manage it. And that's really what it's about, having the tools in place to manage those return rates, to manage that fraud, and do our best to keep it out of the system. So what does debit fraud do, or what do fraudsters do, Kevin, when you get rid of fraud somewhere?
They find another place.
They find another place. That's right. And they have found credit push fraud. They found checks too. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're still writing checks, please don't. That's where all the fraud is moved to, because it's easy, right? But the fraudsters have also moved to credit push fraud. And, I don't know, Kevin, your listeners hopefully are familiar with it, but let's go into a little bit of that if it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, for me, I would like to just learn more about it. So when you say, let's talk about, debit fraud. I know you said right now we have a better handle of it, but let's talk about what that is. Sure. And then let's jump into credit push fraud and why that's kind of new and emerging and why we should be concerned about it.
Sure. So debit fraud, it's where the fraudster gets your routing and account number and they debit your account. We have the unauthorized returns to help you get your money back when that happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but there are ways and recourse for if your account is debited without your authorization. In this scenario, the fraudster is hiding at that ODFI. They are the originator, and they are debiting your account. Sometimes it's not even them stealing your account, but it's instances where they won't stop debiting you. Maybe you signed up for a product you don't want, and they just refuse to stop debiting you. That's still wrong. If you tell them not to use my ACH account, you have to stop, they have to stop. And so originators and banks have really figured that out. They're really good at stopping those debit originations when they're not supposed to be. And they're good at catching those debit originators who sneak in and start using perhaps stolen routing and account numbers to debit you, and realizing when that's happening and just getting them off the network.
Yeah, and when you were saying that, I thought of, I have a couple apps where it'll tell me when there's a large debit transaction, or it'll say, hey Kevin, we've noticed that this vendor is still charging you $12 a month. Do you want to continue their subscription service? So I'm to your point, there's definitely things out there to help with that.
Oh, the tools are in place, right? And credit fraud is credit push fraud is different. This is where the fraudster is hiding at that RDFI, and they are convincing you as the originator to send them money. And there's lots of different scams. There is one that we're seeing recently hit is vendor impersonation fraud. And this happened in a town where I used to live. They were hit very recently and made the news in Atlanta for almost $1 million, where I don't have the full details. It's not all out yet, but it looks like a vendor or somebody pretending to be a vendor either changed the routing and account number for which they're getting paid or created fake invoices. Either one are vendor impersonation fraud. And the city then pushed that money out to that receiving financial institution. And the unique thing about credit push fraud is the fraudster doesn't care how you get that money. If you wire it to them, if you send an ACH, even if you do a check, it doesn't matter. They are ambivalent to how they're receiving those funds. So we need to help educate municipalities, financial institutions. Education really is key.
Jordan, I want to sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah,
I want to go back to that. When you say that the type of payment doesn't matter in that case,
yeah,
what do you like? I know what you're saying, obviously, but why does it not matter?
Well, if many times in vendor impersonation fraud, in credit push fraud, the fraudster is just trying to get you to push them a payment.
Okay, so let's say that I'm the bad guy,
yeah,
and you are the good guy, and I convince you to send me money and impersonate a vendor that you're doing work with today, but I provide you with my account information.
Yeah. So in this situation, there is a real vendor, right? Let's say I'm a municipality, and all of my contracts are public record. So Kevin, as the fraudster, has realized that I have $1 million contract to pay a real vendor. He then calls up the clerk at the county or the city, whatever it is, and says, "Hey, this is me, real vendor, and I have changed my routing and account number." If that city doesn't have proper controls in place, which a very simple one is to use a phone number that's on file, right? Don't call the guy back on the number he just called you to verify that the account's real. But if there are not proper controls in place and that city clerk changes the routing and account number, Kevin just waits until an invoice comes in. And the bottom of an invoice always says you can pay via whatever method you want. And Kevin's already changed the routing and account number to his fraudulent routing and account number. So they will take it if you wire it to them. They will take it if you send an ACH to them. They will take it, and they're just at that point, Kevin, the fraudster, is just sitting there waiting, right? As he's probably got an alert set up that you've been paid. And as soon as that happens, he's going to take that money and potentially send it out of the country.
I see. So then I take the money, send it out. And because it's clear to my account, I've sent it out. There's nothing that the originator could do because the money's already gone.
Well, that's not 100% true.
Okay.
Right. So the faster, and we know this with any type of fraud, the faster you respond as a fraud victim, the more likely you are to get that money back. So what do I mean by that? So there are ways, if ODFI should know how to communicate to the RDFI. We have a tool. It's the risk management portal. And then within that, there's the contact registry. And so any ODFI can reach out to any RDFI and vice versa. All the contact information is in there. That is a NACHA rule. Another good example of self-governance. But knowing what to do and how to respond as the RDFI in this case is very important. Know what your responsibilities are for protecting your customer, but also if you've got a fraudster, if you are housing the receipt of that transaction as the RDFI, it means one of three things, right? It means A, you've allowed a fraudster into your bank, not good. Two, it means that you have allowed a knowing or unknowing money mule into your bank, not good.
Also not good, yeah.
Because that person is a victim as well, right? And they may not know it, but they're causing financial distress potentially for them and for this other company. So you don't want a mule in there either. Or three, you've got an account takeover situation. That person may not even know that their account is being used to receive that money, and then the fraudster is going to take that account and send it out. So none of those situations are good if you're the RDFI. So there are loopholes, or I don't know if a loophole is right, but carve-outs for when there's fraud at a financial institution. So it's important for a financial institution to research those and to know when they can't share customer information.
So
look at the other side.
Yeah, well, and this is going to be a dumb question. I'm sorry, but so as the in that situation, then as the RDFI, that means that I've let Kevin, the fraudster, open up an account. Let's say I've opened up an account there, right?
Sure.
So I can receive funds, and then the ODFI, like you at your ODFI, send me money, send me $1 million because they think I'm the right vendor, even though I'm not, right? In that case, what happens? Like, who's technically liable there? Because, like, from the ODFI standpoint, they're just performing the payment as instructed by their customer, right?
Sure.
So what happens there?
Liabilities and warranties are on the ODFI.
Yeah, okay.
And that's not. There's no expectation for that to change. But each ODFI is also an RDFI. And in most cases, the RDFI is also the ODFI, right? You don't have to be an ODFI on the ACH network, but we should, all of us, want to get this fraud off the network.
Oh, yeah.
If there are red flags that are out there, why not notice them and help out? The tools are available. there are instances where, if a customer has never received, let's say Kevin the fraudster's had this account open for a long time, and they've never received $1 million transaction. He's a consumer. Why would he all of a sudden receive a corporate SEC code for $1 million into his account?
Mm-hmm.
That should be something that the RDFI can say, hold on, this looks a little funny, and maybe you just received an inheritance. Maybe you sold a piece of property. There are reasons that you could receive $1 million. Unfortunately, none for me. But hopefully there could be a reason you could get $1 million, and then the bank should clarify that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this is legitimate. And think about it: when the bank is looking out for you as a consumer on those unusual transactions.
Oh, I'm pumped. I'm like, thank you.
Right. Thanks, dude. Thanks for calling me. They're never going to be upset if they're not a fraudster. I mean, people get upset for a lot of reasons, but for the most case, right? They're going to be happy that the bank called them and said, "Is this legit?" And if they're a money mule, this is an opportunity to say, "Hey, do you realize what you are doing? Do you have any idea?" And you can help get those mules out of the network and help those people from.
Well, and this is where this is
right?
for me. Yeah. And this is for me just a great example of how there's technology. Like, of course, Identity does this too, right? But there's a lot of other technology providers that, if you're looking to, visualize core data, find points in the data where it just is a one-off, right, or an outlier, and then alert or notify a specific user. There's tons of softwares out there that do it. In that example, that would have solved that. That would have protected that ODFI, or the RDFI in that case, because they would have seen, hey, this is an outlier. Kevin is a personal account. He should not have received $1 million. Let's follow up and see what's going on here.
Sure. Or even in the case of let's take payroll impersonation fraud, where a fraudster convinces either the HR to company to change an account. They log into the employees software and change their routing and account number. There's lots of different ways that.
Have you been hearing a lot of that lately?
We have.
Oh, that's all. So hold on. So that someone logs in, like, let's say with me at Identity, someone logs in under me as Identity and changes my payroll information, and then when normal payroll gets sent out, it gets sent to the fraudster's account.
Right, and that's not Kevin's fault, right?
No,
a fraudster did this, and especially if they call in and impersonate you to HR, and HR just takes those payment instructions over the phone, right? That is totally not Kevin's fault.
Wow.
But if Jordan Bennett receives a paycheck for Kevin Miyamoto, and my direct deposit as well as the direct deposit for 6 other people, is that not a red flag as well?
Yeah.
Why are we getting all of these direct deposits for people with different names? There's no name matching requirement in ACH, and I doubt there ever will be. But it's something that you can use. It's a tool. If you see flags like this, you can look into this when you think this is an unusual pattern. This is not something that's typical for this account. Why is it happening? And then as the RDFI, you've got those tools and can help. And you're going to be on the other side of that sometime. So getting the fraudsters off the network and out of our system benefits everybody, even if you were not directly liable as the RDFI and you didn't warrant those transactions.
What's so scary to me is that in that example with payroll fraud, it has nothing to do with banking or even payments. Like, they're logging into an HR system.
I think that is a awesome point, Kevin.
Like, that's scary because there's so many other systems out there that are really, like, they touch banking, but they're not really part of it. But it has payment fraud or banking, fraud attached to it. And
almost none of these credit push scenarios deal with technology. Almost all of it is the fraudster calling in and social engineering. Or their business email compromise is another social engineering credit push scenario, right? So all of these are social engineering. It's not about a hacker getting in and stealing your data and pushing payments out. In most cases, we do have account takeover fraud. That is a thing, and it does happen as well. But it's almost all through social engineering.
Mm.
And that's how this type of payment fraud happens. And that's why education is
Yeah.
so important. People knowing the scenarios where they're going to be attacked and people knowing how to prevent it. You know,
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
in a city that sends out those payments and vendor impersonation, simple policies and procedures in almost all cases, and following those
Yep.
policies and procedures,
Yeah.
right?
Well, even like
We don't
something.
change it for a friend.
Yep.
We follow policy and procedure. That protects the money.
Well, even yeah, something as simple as dual control, right? In that
Dual
scenario, if I'm a
control.
vendor and I call in, it's hey, listen, vendor A wants to change. Let me look at the phone number and contact information on file. I'll call that, and then verifying, having a manager or someone else approve that transaction, right? Making sure that the right steps have been followed. Yeah, for me, this is more of a broken process at the corporate level when they're updating their vendor records to make that payment more than anything
Absolutely.
else. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
that's why it's so hard too, because the payment from the ODFI standpoint, that's a good payment. Like they're doing
That's a
their
good
job.
point. Yeah, that originator told you to push it out.
Yeah.
You're following the payment instructions. There are some things that the ODFI can do, in these scenarios. If they have a whole bunch of, let's say HR gets hacked or gets convinced to send out a lot of change requests. Well, maybe that's not normal. Maybe the ODFI should say, normally we have one change request every 2 months, and you are sending me 17. Virtually all your employees are changed.
Yep.
Is that right? And it can do some things like that. They can do pattern recognition as well.
Yeah.
They can say all of your vendors all of a sudden changed. But for the one-off, that's going to be a tough catch. That's going to potentially be easier to catch at the RDFI.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's education.
Mm-hmm.
Education on what to look for, these patterns, and knowing that credit push fraud is where the fraudsters have moved. And so the originators, or the ODFIs, educating their originators, educating these cities, these corporates, and even individuals. There are some individual credit push scams too, that our consumer base should be aware of. So education and knowing how to protect yourself is vital for stopping this type of fraud.
Yep, yep. And so Jordan, as we wrap up, I think you're probably gonna say education, but what is it that the RDFIs and ODFIs can do to help, especially with credit push fraud? I mean, you mentioned education. Is there anything else that they could really kind of hone in on?
Well, that RDFI having taking some action, and instead of just being a passive receiver, looking and helping, knowing that they're also going to be the ODFI at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having everybody participating in fraud defense. You know, Working together is how the ACH network stays safe. We are self-governing. We've done a really good job of keeping fraud off the network, and it takes every single participant knowing what's happening and how to prevent it. We continue to be a leader in keeping, fraud off the network. That's why we're so trusted, and why the ACH network continues to grow so fast, even after 50 years. This network is 50 years old, and we continue to grow by high single digits every year. So
Mm-hmm.
we're looking to keep that going, and to do that, we have to remain trusted.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it
Well,
takes
hey,
everyone.
Jordan, thank you so much. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do so?
jbennett@nacha.org. Yeah, reach out. Let's talk fraud. Talk anti-fraud. Let's talk keeping the fraud.
Anti-fraud. There you go.
Yeah, not
Well,
fraud.
hey,
Not fraud.
Jordan, thank you so much for spending the time with me this morning. I really appreciate it. And of course, your wisdom. You're so knowledgeable. I mean, this is really good stuff. So hopefully, the RDFIs and the ODFIs out there listening can really take a lot from this. And for those of you listening at home, we'll see you on the next one.